Hello everyone, it is Relic Jones once again, and I am going to tell you another tale from playing D&D. Like 3 years back, I told you of the first time just messing around with it. We had a starter box of 3.5 and we had no idea. And then by the time that we got to pick it up again, and I picked up the books, it was 4th edition. So this is a 4th D story, everybody. Gotta warn you. There's pros and cons to 4th D. Mainly, I don't know why in the monster manual the HP on everything is ridiculous. If I seen the party winning, sometimes I just drop the HP because I didn't want the monster being kicked in the corner until it died. So that's a to be warned about the edition and the adventure I'm going to tell you. So I don't normally have that big of a party, and in other stories you'll see why, but there becomes to be some problems with that too, having small parties. I guess it evens out higher level stuff. Who knows? So the first actual 4th edition game and real serious game that we played was actually the adventure that's out in the back of the dungeon guide, and it's not that great, but let's talk about it. Talk about the adventure, talk about the enemies we fight, what was good about 4th edition and what's not, and let's talk about the party. So we had a party of two. Two of my best friends who happened to be siblings made these. One of them was a character called Dark Shantae, made by Shantae. Like, go to figure. We were in high school, though, when he decided that name, so I couldn't just give him a pass on being young. He was the oldest of us, too. Character sheet. This is what the character sheet looked like. Had all that stuff he filled out. So Dark Shantae was a Dwarf Warlord, and if you ever see Shantae, he's pretty fitting to a dwarf. He's a pretty chunky, stocky kind of guy. Massive. Yet again, these stats though are for when they got to level 5. He got to level 5. His brother did not because he did a little side mission that ended in some death with him. So it might not be completely accurate to those levels, but he eventually got to an armor class of 20, which made it that most things didn't even get to hit him. He was a Dwarf Warlord, and Warlords got to give people like extra turns and extra attacks and boosts to attacks, which is pretty funny. And I learned a lesson in this about what that is. It's pretty funny what happens. Yeah. And then the other player was a Dragonborn fighter, and he played a female one called Stella. Stella. Stella the Dragonborn fighter. And he actually gave a little bit of character background, claiming that for personality traits, loves common objects. I guess like teacups or something. Like maybe it's going out and adventuring and finally sitting down at home. She's just like, I appreciate this nice chair that you have and that nice mug you have over there. Yeah, it was an interesting character. Say the least. But it's a good mix to have a fighter and a warlord, because the warlord gives those extra attacks to the fighter that already gets extra attacks. Interesting. I can read through the miscellaneous items that they started with. I believe Stella started with a scythe. No proficiency in scythe, just like, hey, I'll get a scythe, 2d4. At least I'll do 2 damage every time I get to hit. She didn't hit that often without Dark Shantae's increases as a warlord to help, I believe, hits and being able to do more damage. it's been a while since I've seen 4th. So I'm not for sure what. He had Knight's move, which let him move around the battlefield. I think he had inspirational abilities at one point. I don't think he had it in this part of the adventure. Yeah, and as a warlord, Dwarf, he clearly had a warhammer as his thing. So he dealt out more damage and hit more often because it's just the rolls. Thomas didn't have good rolls. It's bad when you got a person that just ain't lucky with the 20-sided dice. Can't hit nothing. Stella wasn't that. Stella, the dragon, wasn't that bad. But eventually just constantly used her breath weapon because it hit instead of the scythe. But this adventure, she eventually got something other than a scythe. I'm trying to get if there's a name to this particular adventure in the back of the Dungeon Master book. I don't think there was. I liked how it started with a little adventure, though. I wish 5th edition did that, but the 5th edition starter box is so cheap, I guess it don't matter. Well, you buy it on Amazon. I would say support your local game stores if it wasn't literally double the price. That's what I don't like about this. If I had a local game store that let me play, maybe I would pick up a book at $50 a pop. That's a little scary. My books are not $50 a pop, but I guess they're not that big. So the adventure is pretty much you're diving into a Kolbolt hill, fighting a bunch of Kolbolts. I forget what the setup is. Maybe they're attacking caravans coming by, which is a little close to the starting adventure in Mines of Fendelver, actually, which I've had to play with people about 3 times. But I only played this one once. Maybe I can get you to... It's a bad camera. But you can see the map. Start right there with the acid pit, and eventually you wind up in this icy lair. I wonder what level 1 boss monster could be fought there in a Kolbolt mine. You know the dungeon manual probably can guess. So like each little spot was its own adventure, and it took like 2 days to go through this because the HP was a lot. Just I find it way too much, especially for 2, maybe for a party of 4. I don't know if it was intended for a party of 4. Probably was, but so you started at the sludge pit, and you had. Sorry, I'm reading from the book just to get it. You had, and one thing that 4th edition did good is it classified monsters into types to help you know how to play them right. There was artillery, which used slings. There was Kolbolts with slings, and then they had skirmishers, which were fighters. They used spears. They're Kolbolts. There was 5 of them in here, and I don't think I lowered the amount of enemies, but I eventually had to lower the HP because, I mean, like, the skirmishers have 27 HP. At level 5, how much did, like, Shantae and the party have? 48 at level 5, but they were level 1. They had a whole lot less HP then. And Stella either took a lot of damage. I don't think her HP was 14. It probably was 20, 32, maybe? They didn't die, which I find... I don't remember what would have been the last thing that Stella did. Stella took hits then. Sorry, Stella. Good party player, though. So eventually they clear out the sludge pit in the middle. They had the sludge pit, and it was difficult terrain. You get knocked in to get back out. It was like a DC 13 strength check to break free. A D10 plus 2 I don't think anything fell. I think maybe a Kolbolt or two fell in, got knocked in by a very heavyweight dwarf with a warhammer, but I don't think the player characters got knocked in. So they went through the sludge pit. I think it was perfectly fine. I didn't have to alter the HP, I think, for that. Then next that they ended up going into was the tomb. And I think they started having trouble with the dart traps on the wall. They got hit by the dart traps a little bit on the wall. Ah, this is where I edited it too. It probably wasn't good that I added a player character enemy in here. So they went and cleared out 3 Kolbolts, no problem. And then they're looking over at this like funeral case where they do the embalming. They're looking in the wall and they see like a tapestry of dragons because Kolbolts love dragons. They're just chilling there, and then this Mothman-like character walks through the wall at them. He's like, hey, what's going on? They go murder hobo on this character. I think I made him a level 2. I had a complete character sheet. Maybe I can find it. Whoops. It was my own made-up character, too. Like race and stats. It was like this telekinetic. So it would be like a psionic. It's a psionic character. Yep, here it is. It was a ranger we call the race Nightloft. If I get to those books, it's interesting. So he was a male, 17, weighs only like 101 pounds. It was a very light, and it was a rogue character, but it could walk through walls. It could fly. It can do a mind trick. It literally tried to like had these antennas, and I think it touched Shantae and made a clone of himself that he thought he had to fight. It was really weird. He was just like, well, hold on, I have to tell you like plot progression stuff. But they just murder hoboed him until he like left. It's like, okay, you deal with the problem. He was gonna like tell him that there was something with the dragons going wrong. Something similar to like the start of Wrath of the Dragon Horde or Wrath of the Dragon Queen kind of thing. Like the dragons were causing some sort of end of the world catastrophe. Which I guess they never got to because they went and beat up the plot developing character that I threw in there. Yeah, they didn't kill him, but he's like, dude, I'm out of here. I had a job to go do. I had to stop this dragon. You won't let me help you. He was going to help the characters. But they just murder hoboed him and says, like, leave. He had 30 HP, so maybe they started with more HP than I thought. Seeing what stuff. He had utility abilities. He had a crossbow, which did pretty decent damage, but they didn't really... He was going to help them. Often in these adventures, characters that would help get murder hoboed. Because my buddies just didn't want to keep them around, I guess. Interesting. They freaked out. It's like, oh, why is this guy coming out of the wall? Because he was like telekinetic, and it was just like a projection of him, I think, was why he didn't die. He's like, I'm going to tell you something. It's a MacGuffin. I don't know. So eventually they go through the crypt pretty fine. Just to go to... It literally just calls it Skull Skull. It's more crypt with another sludge pit. But I guess okay. The Kolbolts are kind of stuck up on a higher area, so they have advantage to rain down rocks, which is really what lets the Kolbolt slingers do more damage, but there's only 2, so I don't know why. But this is where it introduced... 4th edition introduced it, and I think everyone should apply it. The concept of minions. One-hit kill bad guys. That's all it is. One hit kill bad guys. It lets you have a bigger army, lets people show off more cool skills, minion stuff. It's a really good thing. So there's Kolbolt minions that got sweeped up. Now, the thing that caused them trouble was the guard drakes. They killed one guard drake, and then Shantae left one alive, bloodied. I think in a corner. It's like, hey man, he's talking to Stella. Hey, got any extra food? Let's try to befriend the guard drake. Mistake number 1 as a DM. The guard drake was way too powerful for the players. But I was like, hey, you're only level 1. There should be a party of 2, right? Go ahead and get your guard drake. After food, and I think eventually got bit once and took some HP damage. Yeah, the guard drake. Oh, yeah. Got the guard drake, which eventually had a... Yeah, get its bite attack was +6 to hit, so it like always hit, especially with just Kolbolts. A D10 +3, or a D10 +9 while an ally was involved within 2 spaces of him, which Dark Shantae as the Warlord was always in close proximity of anybody, so he could give off his abilities to people, because it was like, here, have an extra movement, or here, have an extra attack. He did that with the guard drake, and I was dumb because it was a level 2 enemy to let him have that ability the same as in the monster manual. Stupid idea. I would never do it again. But yeah, that was pretty bad. And then there was a trap with a skull, which makes it the skull room that I don't think they ever used. They eventually went through that room, raided it. I think they got some jewels, treasure. So they're running out of this room with a guard drake. They killed everybody and a couple extra jewels. So that was interesting. Another mistake that I found out, don't let your players read your Dungeon Master Guide constantly. They're like, oh man, what's in the dungeon? Oh, I hope we don't fight this. No Minotaurs, please. Flipping through it. Well, they flipped through it until they got to... Because the Dungeon Master guys, Orcus, had a lot of liches. They're like, how can I become a lich? They're level 1! And they're... Let's look at their alignment, shall we, to see if they should even be asking that. Oh, ooh. We didn't put alignments. I was pretty for sure that they were playing good characters. They're like, let's be a lich. I'm like, well, no, in here there's rules for becoming a lich. And they kept asking me about becoming a lich, so I kept giving them, like, here, I guess treasure would help you, because you need a lot of gold to become a lich. Let's see if I can find this particular spell to become a lich. They have stuff like this all throughout it, like making a mechanized dragon was one. I think there was one in the Dungeon Master Guide, 5th edition, had something to do with like a death spirit. Where is the index? Lich. Yeah. Lich transformation. Oh, it's all backwards because it's camera, but Lich transformation spell. Characters must be level 14. We're level 1. Yeah. Character. So it's to a character. Takes an hour. See text. And it costs a whopping like 100,000 gold pieces to do. So, yeah, they wanted to be a lich. And then Stella, being a Dragonborn, is like, oh man, that means I can become a Draco Lich, right? Like, you're Dragonborn, it don't work that way, but okay. So they were walking through the dungeon with this eventual idea. It was like, we're all going to become liches and like rule the world. Like, I thought you were good guys. Why? And then they eventually got into literally labeled Big Boss Area, which just had like a Kolbolt Shaman. I think by now we've leveled up. I think they got to level 2. Because the HP system was wonky too. And this was about the time where I had to drop some HP because the amount of units going out. Yeah. There was a worm priest, or like a wyvern worm, if you know how dragons are spelled with a Y, worm. Yeah, he had nearly 40 HP. I think I dropped it because they eventually kicked him into the corner. I think Dark Shantae went and grabbed his worm staff that he had and smacked him over the head. I'm pretty for sure that's how it ended. Which eventually they looted his magic staff, his staff of war magic, I think it was called. Yeah, they killed him like really early on. And then because they had a Dragonborn, they rolled diplomacy to be like, hey, I'm part dragon. You're worshipping a dragon, right? It's like, hey, I'm pretty much brothers with him. Kind of. It's like, okay, you have a contract with us. Shantae was like, give us a contract. So they literally like signed their souls. And like several adventures later, they're like, what does the souls do? And it's like, I don't know. I just gave it up. It's like, you guys kept wanting stuff, so I gave you things. I gave you like a contract for 5 souls. I guess it would help with the Lich transformation, maybe? I don't know. There's a rolling boulder trap that probably affected Shantae a little bit, but he can't be moved by being a dwarf, so yeah. So the Kolbolts did nothing, and I think, yeah, Stella was like, hey, let me talk to him. Let me talk to the dragon, and that's how the actual boss fight goes. They go to that ice pit that I told you about. The True Terror is what it calls, and it's this little ice pit area. And then this is kind of what I'm talking about, the HP. It's a boss monster, so it's supposed to get hit by a party of 4, but it's a party of 2. We were level 2 at the time. Let me flip to where they eventually fight like a young white dragon. Yeah, young white dragon, which is supposed to be good for level 3 characters. A party of level 3 characters. It's like 2 level 2s. You can show it right there. Bad camera. I am getting a better camera next couple of days, but I wanted to film this. Yeah, 200 HP. I mean, the guy has a scythe. He can do 8 max. It's not his proficiency. I guess that was his fault. Yeah, so they eventually kicked the dragon into a corner. Like the breath weapon thing's cool because you had to roll a 6-sided dice to see if the breath weapon recharged. And I guess it didn't recharge. Like I got off breath weapon twice. I should have just messed with it as a dungeon master and said, hey, breath weapon. And yeah, they beat it up until it died. It was kind of nasty. Even had like a fear ability, and it just didn't really affect them. Penalty to their attack roll, which is probably why Stella didn't hit, because it didn't have proficiency, and then a penalty +2. -2. It was nasty. So they eventually kill the dragon, and I guess the Kolbolts didn't really check up on it. I think they were feeding it, they were taking caravans and feeding the supplies to the white dragon, because Kolbolts were worship dragons pretty much. And then in this particular adventure, the adventurers would get a +1 life drinking longsword, which Stella was like, I have proficiency in swords, so please, I don't like my scythe. So it takes it, and this is what it does. +1 enchanted bonus to attack roll and damage roll, which is cool. I don't think we used the damage roll, but it might have been for hits. So we got a better chance to hit because she was missing the whole time. And then on a critical hit, so you have to roll a 20. I didn't like that. Didn't like that. You do an extra d6 of necrotic damage. In addition, the user when a user drops an enemy to 0 HP, eventually gets more temporary hit dice. Oh, we read it as in you had a crit and then do that. That was a bad move. I should have ruled it like that. That was a good ruling. Like whenever, not just with the crit thing. Whenever you get 5 temporary. Stella lived through all the adventures. She would have lived more if we would have done that ruling. Oh. You also got a pearl. You got 100 gold pieces, which we're trying to get 10,000, like 100,000 to become a lich. So yeah, and that was the adventure. They eventually got out of the cave on a different side. Like I didn't let them leave the same way. And their adventures eventually carried on. I'll tell them later, but this is a pretty big video as is. So if you like this, go and watch the previous one. I'll put a link in it. Like and subscribe and do all that stuff. And comment below if you like this video. Thank you for watching the first real adventure in Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. We did a lot of 4th edition. And then I have like a 5th edition adventure that was pretty good. Hopefully get to play. I don't get to play as much as I wish. Maybe once a year. But this was Relic Jones. Sorry for the glasses glare. Signing out. Peace.